So oftentimes people think about guardianships and conservatorships as being obscure, but they're in the news. Recently, Jay Leno famously had an issue with his wife and got it resolved. But one of the most famous cases, if you've ever been to LA County Court on a regular basis, you had to have seen the protests for or against Britney Spears. And you wonder, what was that all about? And I think there was a movie made about it and a bunch of press about it. Yeah. We're excited to have today a woman who knows from the inside, who's not only involved in this case, but actually is an advocate for conservatorships and guardianship reform, an advocate, Lisa MacCarley, an attorney. Lisa, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me today, Bill. Nice to see you.
And right off the bat, even though I know this material, I made the mistake, and I guess it's very important to be specific. In California, we have two types of these special cases, guardianship and conservatorship. And I think the answer is guardianships are for children and conservatorships are for adults. Is that basically right?
Exactly right. So for whatever reason, every state can break it up any way they want. Like in Arizona, guardianship refers to, I think, the person, and conservatorship refers to the estate. But here in California, if you're over the age of 18 and someone has commenced what we call protective proceeding to appoint someone to make decisions for you, that's a conservatorship. And Britney was most definitely in a conservatorship.
Now, most of just by numbers, when I've been involved in conservatorships, most commonly they're because something happened to the parents and they weren't available, and the child was otherwise normal, if there's such a thing as normal, but because they were a child, they couldn't manage their own affairs and needed someone to be appointed by them other than their parents to be responsible for them. So that's one type of conservatorship. And another one is the case that you're involved with Britney, where, could have been when she was a child, it happened to be as an adult. But oftentimes as children, their guardianships are created because there's so much business going on. Right. Somebody wants to step in and create some sort of a legal binding relationship separate from the parents. Is that how that works?
Well, let me just clarify. So basically, conservatorships of the estate would be warranted guardianship. Let's start with the children first. So children have guardians. A guardianship of the estate would be necessary anytime a person under the age of 18 receives property, whether it's money that is inherited or money or a piece of property if somebody passes away. So anytime a child has money of their own, you need a guardianship of the estate. When a parent is unable to take care of a child for various sad reasons, whether it's incarceration or substance abuse or other calamity, then another person will be appointed as guardianship of the person. So always when a child receives money, a parent especially would be appointed as guardianship of the person, of the estate. And then only when there's no parent available do we need a guardianship of the person of a child.
Got it. And so guardianship of the estate would be maybe a child actor or actress or celebrity where they have money coming in that's their own money as opposed to their family money. And then
exactly.
Who's the guardian of that estate would be the parent, absent a parent, or if the parent's not capable, then that's when we appoint somebody else to be the guardian.
Exactly.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, conservatorship is when an adult is not able to manage their own affairs, and these things happen often when there's a medical accident or a car accident, people become incapacitated, or they're elderly and have mental issues, or if they have some sort of a breakdown. Without getting the specifics, let's just talk about the generality. So basically, conservatorship is just an adult who doesn't have the capability of managing their affairs, and the court appoints somebody else.
Right. So the standard is that you would get a conservatorship of your person if you are unable to provide for your own need for good health, food, clothing, and shelter. So that's the legal definition of when the court would intervene and appoint someone to make decisions for you. A person who is unable to resist fraud or undue influence, or is substantially unable to manage their own financial affairs, would have a conservator of the estate.
So the estate as opposed to the person. Got it. Mm-hmm. And so to go back to guardianships, when you have a child who's not capable and needs the special needs of some sort of guardianship, becomes an adult, by definition, they need a new entity, but the default is going to be the parents, right? If the parents raise the child and now the child is an adult, I guess the child might make the case, hey, I don't need this anymore. The parents go to the court and say, no, we still need to be in charge. And the court makes a determination at that point as to continuing the relationship as a guardianship as a conservatorship as opposed to a guardianship.
It happens. I mean, I won't say that never happens. It's very rare. So generally the presumption is that, and again, I don't make up these rules and I don't agree with it. When you're 18 years old, you have the legal right to manage your money, whether it's $10 or $10 million. At age 18, you're deemed to have the wisdom, maturity, and competence to manage your own money.
And if it's somebody who wasn't competent before as a child, the presumptions can be the parents. The parents just have to go through another process. If we're talking about special needs children, that's a common case. So the presumption is the parents would continue, but they would change from guardianship to conservatorship.
Right. So very rarely do children or people who are born with developmental disabilities ever get guardianships, because the regional center and there's all kinds of basically the law would defer to the parents. It would only happen if there was a parent unavailable. But in California, once a person with developmental disabilities turns 18, they will be eligible for what is called a limited conservatorship, which is slightly different and slightly different rules, slightly different notice requirements, and also slightly different orders that the court can make to protect a person with a developmental disability.
Now, there's a whole nother world that you were involved with, at least from where I sit on the outside, a whole different world of circumstances. I mean, you have people who have born with medical issues. You have people who are the unfortunate victims of some sort of a accident or medical accident or car accident. There's a whole other world of people who, for whatever reason, we might judge are no longer capable of being on their own, maybe because of drug use, maybe because of some sort of mental breakdown. And there's a process for conservatorship, which basically means somebody is taking away some of their rights, and the court has to agree to that. And so there was a time, I think, when that bar was much lower, and I believe we raised it, I want to say like the 60s or 70s or 80s, and the laws were somewhat updated. And in the case that you were involved with Britney Spears, there are people say, oh, she's crazy, we should have this thing or not. But I think the thing that people appreciate is we should have a high bar, because you're really talking about taking somebody's rights away. In her case, the fruits of the labor, whether you like her music or style or don't, she earned it, and we're taking away her ability to make decisions what to do with that money in some cases, correct?
Oh, absolutely. But Britney Spears was a very exceptional case. I mean, I haven't seen anything quite like it, but basically she never qualified for a conservatorship. She was deprived of her due process rights to counsel, to be afforded copies of the documents that and declarations that were presumably sent to the court to conserve her. Basically, Britney Spears' conservatorship was about as rancid and unconstitutional as it gets. She was absolutely deprived of her due process rights, and of course, then made to work, then made to share the labor, the fruits of her labor, then made to pay child support in the amount of $40,000 a month by basically a group of people that conspired to deprive her of her constitutional rights and civil liberties.
Now, your role in this case was?
So I've never even met Britney. She knows who I am, and of course I know who she is. But my role was that during COVID, in the summer of 2020, I was invited to attend a Free Britney rally, and not because I had any great qualifications, but because I had already identified by summer of 2020 serious flaws, serious defects with the probate court system and the way that we conserve people, and I began to advocate for changes in the court system itself. So the Free Britney activists, mostly younger people, her fans, her amazing fan base, got in touch with me and said, would you come to a rally? And I said, sure, because it was COVID. Everything was shut down. There's nothing to do. And I was probably just as depressed and unhappy as everybody else in the world. If you can remember, wondering what's going to happen to all of us. And so I went, and at the rally, I met a pair of journalists, a lady named, they were called Britney's Graham, Tess Barker and Babs Gray, and they had been doing an ongoing podcast about Britney. And they came up to me and they said, we have these papers. Can you tell us, are these like legitimate court papers? And, you know, I've been in business by then 28 years. But so I took a look, and that is when I discovered that Britney had attempted to hire her own attorney, an attorney that actually has a very famous last name, Adam Streisand, who is related to Barbara. And he was not allowed to represent Britney on the basis that there had been some type of doctor's report filed stating that Britney lacked the capacity to retain her own attorney. The challenge.
Let me set the stage a little bit for people who weren't there. So when you say the Free Britney rally, was this one of those that was held in front of the Mosque courthouse?
Yes.
Okay.
Could you imagine the courage that I must have had? So there I am, a real live practicing attorney. But I felt some empathy for them, and I was curious to know why they were protesting. People like myself, I had knew about the conservatorship of Britney Spears, but I didn't have all the details because the files were basically sealed and locked away.
Now, that's interesting. Just for a note, here in LA County, I'm sure it varies by state law, but in California law, probate files are almost all available online. Conservatorships and guardianships are adjudicated in probate court, but conservatorship and guardianship files are almost always sealed, and the documents are either not available. Certain pieces are available, certain pieces are not available.
Actually, there are certain documents that are routinely deemed confidential. For example, medical records of some sort. Sometimes there's also files like we have to provide when there's a conservatorship. Names, addresses, social security number, birthday. So basically all the confidential information that you don't want public to this day, we have to provide it to the court. They keep it, all of that information in every conservatorship. But what happened in Britney's case, the entire file was kept under seal. So nobody in the public, none of the news reporters, not even Britney, had access to her own file.
And I can verify that because one of the things I do for my attorney clients is I track cases, and I'll update them about the probate notes and upcoming hearings and results, and I'll send documents. I try to be almost like a paralegal supporting the attorneys I work with. And I thought, well, it'd be kind of fun, as I have a podcast, why not, find out about the Britney case, and maybe I have some, insight to, maybe the procedures I see or something. And I knew the room they were doing it in. I was there. If you were at the building, it was like overwhelming. You felt like you were at a rock concert, just surrounded with like teenage girls screaming and with placards and all that. It was definitely a crazy scene. But unlike other cases, I couldn't find the status on some of the things in the way that we would on a normal case. It was very interesting. Yeah, and that was part of the process. Now, we went to the courtroom that day. There would be a printout with all the actions. It was interesting what you could find out. You knew something was going on, but you couldn't really tell what it was.
Right, exactly. Well, so the probate notes, generally, in other words, the summary of what the court was ruling on and what was being looked at, those generally were available, but they're fairly innocuous. So they'll say, there's Britney's 13th account current, Jamie Spears' 13th account current request for attorney's fees. So you kind of knew what the judge was going to talk about, but we didn't necessarily have all the details, because the accounting itself, for example, would have been either filed with a motion to seal, or the relevant information, that the tidbits would have been redacted from the public file.
Now, based on your view of the case, obviously, actually, you haven't met her, but sort of, you obviously follow the case and people who know her and such. One thing I've learned about, artists like Britney, I don't know anything about her at all, really, but like her, famous singers and actors and such, is while they might seem frivolous as a character, what you see in the world is them playing the role of their character. And at least that's my experience. And the other part I've noticed is almost all really successful celebrities are incredibly viciously successful business people, like sharp as a tack. They know business, they negotiate, they've been around so many contracts, they focus on what they want to do. What's your sense of her? Obviously, here's a case where they're saying she wasn't capable of managing her affairs. Well, at first blush, I say there's no way she could continue to put out the creative content she did. Like it or not my style, never went to a show, never bought a song. But you have to look back and say she had her own show in Vegas, she had these albums, she had these tours. You can't do that without being bright, smart, organized, thoughtful, communicative, right? Am I missing something here?
You're absolutely right. And that was when I began to kind of peel away at how she ended up in this conservatorship and how they treated her during the conservatorship, it really became reprehensible to me, because you are absolutely right. She never needed a conservatorship. What happened was that they used the conservatorship to manipulate her to because of the prior family law proceeding. So unfortunately, in these courts, there are mostly, at that time, mostly white older men who, maybe in this case her family law court, she certainly did not comply with the order to get a driver's license. But Bill, they took her babies away. She was a nursing mother. In her body were so many hormones and chemicals and all of the good stuff to be a mommy to two little boys that were born 12 months apart. Her family law proceedings started just weeks, if not maybe months, after her second baby was born. They kept her babies away from her. They kept her babies away from her under the ruse that she was not following some stupid court order to produce a driver's license. There was, as far as I know, no drug test that ever found that she was dangerous. But even if Britney was engaging in behavior that was dangerous to her children, like we know about that famous car incident where the baby was on her lap or something, they could have created orders that she was not allowed to drive with these babies, but they kept them away for her for days and sometimes weeks. They separated this 26-year-old mom whose entire body was flooded with the need to love and protect these babies. Any woman would have been traumatized. Any woman would have acted out and have felt the way and behaved the way she was. I would have. I was actually divorced as a young mom, and I know how difficult that was to be separated, to hand the children over to dad. I had a wonderful co-parent who never kept me away from the children, but Kevin Federline and his attorneys bullied Britney into not having her own children. She should have seen them every day.
And look, I have a daughter who's pregnant with a third child. Women and hormones, that whole thing. I tell all the time, honey, you have a past for being crazy. You're pregnant. I mean, you just tell me you're pregnant, they'll go, oh, that's why you're crazy. That's okay. Like, we get it.
Right.
If you've been around women pre, post, it's just a whole thing going on there.
Right.
And the whole thing with the driving with a child in the lap, I grew up in a time where we didn't have car seats. Like, you sat without a seatbelt, front seat, back seat. There's all kinds of metal pieces hanging out of the cars. Somehow we managed to get through that. My mother was never arrested for being for child endangerment. Somehow we managed to make it all work. You look at the cars we used to drive in. I don't know, and I really think that some of these rules are created by a government that wants to have the ability to take people's rights away. And here's a case where you can argue about how stringent the government's rights should be on auto safety. But it's always the government wants more power on auto safety so they can use it in these cases to take away people's rights, in this case, in a family law case. So it's very challenging.
So what happened was, just to finish the story, is that they told her, basically the lawyers and these other people that were involved, that if you agree to be a conservatee, if you agree to be a good girl, then you will begin to see your children again. It was a masterpiece of manipulation for poor Britney. And I mean, she talks about this occasionally, like all she wanted was to be reunited with her children.
Of course.
So she agreed to allow her father, and I'm sure quite reluctantly agreed, okay, you can be my conservator. And then they made her work, and then they took her money. It's really just...
And you're not talking about just money. I don't know a lot about her, but I do know at one point she had her own show in Vegas. You're talking about real money.
Yes, real money. And they got percentages. And so here is a woman that was entrapped in a conservatorship that she didn't need, with a conservator that she didn't want. She was made to work. And, the threat was basically, well, do you really want to embarrass yourself by going back to court? And she'd gone back to court and wanted to have her rights to self-autonomy restored. But they made her work, and they took a percentage of it. And then Kevin Federline was given $40,000 a month in child support. And this is from a woman who was legally classified for 13 years as unable to manage her own financial affairs, unable to provide for her own needs for food, clothing, and shelter. And here she is supporting people, making millionaires out of people that, completely illegitimately.
Seems to me that they should have held all her money for her own benefit over time, on the idea that if she's not capable, at some point maybe she runs out of gas and can't continue to earn money, and now you have money put away and saved for her, but instead they put her, it looks to me like they put her on a treadmill and just kept her going and going and going to pay the bills. Heartbreaking. So, one of the things, I think I'm a little older than you, but when I remember the movie that I think really changed this area tremendously was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It was
that was the first movie I ever saw.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In my life. I was like 11 or 12.
So it was a popular book, but it was made into a movie. It was masterfully acted and done, and it's art, and so you can say, wow, it's a masterpiece of art. The question is, how reflective was it of the general problem, right? It's one of those things where you have a movie about a problem, and that might be the only example, or that movie can be about the problem and it represents the entire piece, and we end up making public policy. I think a lot based on that movie. There was a lot of action towards freeing people from getting mental health as a result, and we overshifted by making it impossible for the state to take people who are really dangerous to society, and we're all flooded with those people. We see them all over the streets, all over the place, and now we have the law in the books that's used. I mean, nobody thought Britney was a danger to anybody else, but maybe her and her kids, maybe. But nobody ever said she was going to murder a person on the street.
No,
she was a danger to society as a whole, right? No, that was never.
So basically, you're talking about the criteria for a very different type of
Yes.
conservatorship.
Yes.
Lanterman Petrus short, LPS, otherwise known in my community as a mental health conservatorship. The
Yes.
mental health conservatorship is very, very different than the one that Britney was placed in, and I think obviously intentionally because it's not as lucrative. A LPS or mental health conservatorship, just to give a quick example, terminates every year unless there is a reason, a finding that the person who's conserved still needs it. So had Britney been in, say, an LPS conservatorship, which I don't think she ever would have qualified for, that would have terminated on its own, of its own every year, and they would have had to go back every year to prove that she was she was gravely disabled, a danger to herself or a danger to others. I mean, obviously Britney Spears never qualified for that, but she never qualified for any conservatorship.
But it seems to me that the other side used Britney as crazy to confuse the public, to get the public on their side, not the non-Britney fans, and almost kind of isolates the Britney fans, right? If all you have are teenage girls screaming "Free Britney," and other people like me look at this and go, "Wow, I guess she must have really had some mental problems or something," and I don't know the difference legally, then it doesn't seem like an outrage. But when you describe the process now, I go, well, that's outrageous. I mean, to say she couldn't support, I can't support myself financially as well as she could. Whatever her deficiencies were, she could make more money in a couple of weeks than I do all year, and then go back and be a mother if she wanted to, right?
Exactly, and that's the shame of it, is that what was done to Britney was, I believe, fraudulent. It was a scam. They conspired to put her in this bubble and kept her there for 13 years, where she was not allowed to know, she was not allowed to speak with an attorney to tell her that you had a right to counsel. So going back to the story of how I became involved, so I go to this Free Britney rally for the first time in July of 2020. I'm handed these documents, and that's when I see Britney picked an attorney who showed up in court, and he tried to advocate for someone other than Jamie Spears to be the conservator. Britney was willing to accept assistance, which to me indicated that she had good insight, that she understood that she was having trouble, but she needed some help. And Adam Streisand was kicked out of the courtroom. He was told, "You're not allowed to represent Britney. We have a doctor's declaration by a very famous doctor named Dr. Edward Spar." And Dr. Spar apparently communicated through some declaration to Reva Getz, who was the presiding judicial officer. She was a commissioner, that Britney did not have the capacity to retain counsel. They kicked Adam Streisand out of the courtroom. He had never been in a conservatorship proceeding before. He left, and then he says, well, there's nothing I can do. They have a doctor's declaration. But Bill, I'm here to tell you on the record that there was never a doctor's declaration. Dr. Spar has subsequently been interviewed, and there is a documentary called Spears versus Spears. And he says, I never met Britney Spears. So what they did on February 4th, 2008, is they lied to Adam Streisand, and then they spent 13 years covering it up.
Wow.
I'm writing a book about it. I have all of the documentation. I have all the proof. I have all the declarations. What happened to Britney is a disgrace. And it was even more disgraceful that when she finally heard that she had the right to counsel, it took a while, but that's when she addressed Judge Brendan Penny and said, this conservatorship has caused me trauma, exploitation, and abuse. And she was right about that.
Now, it's interesting you say those words, because I used to go to court every day. Judge Penny is the head, as the senior, I think, of the probate judge, not the head of the department.
Presiding probate judge.
Presiding probate judge, but there's somebody. But she, at the time, she was a senior, and there was a presiding judge, Wada, or Asian man, and then he moved on, and she got promoted or whatever. Anyhow, I had been in her court once a week. She was phenomenal, and it turns out she knows an attorney friend of mine. They'd worked together as attorneys, and of all the judges, I had actually met her like in the hallways. My friend introduced me, and she said hello, and she'd recognized me. I'm like, oh my gosh, Judge Penny recognized me. I was so excited. And I remember seeing that the Britney Spears thing was in her court, and I had heard it was a miscarriage of justice. I thought, well, that doesn't sound right, because Judge Penny wouldn't put up with any nonsense. Like, she is a no nonsense. Yeah. What's the bottom line here? Let's move this thing forward. And so it sounds to me like that's where it got cleared up.
No, she participated in it. There's no question.
No.
Yes, she participated in the cover-up because she knew what had happened, because she was then the presiding supervising attorney in the department of lawyers that review cases. There is no way that she didn't know that, number one, Britney Spears was entitled to an attorney of her own choice. They selected their favorite, and I call him a crony, call him a minion, whatever you want to call him. The judges selected their favorite guy to be Britney's attorney and deprive Britney, and that is a blatant violation of her due process rights under the Constitution of the state of California and the United States. There's not any question about it. I mean, I could probably, if you gave me screen sharing, I could show you where this happened. Britney knew. Britney found out through the rallies, through watching me, through watching what was being described. And finally, Adam Streisand spoke up and said, yeah, I showed up and I was told there was this capacity declaration. So that's how she discovered, and that's where she found her voice to tell Judge Penny, I don't want to be in this conservatorship anymore. Her court-appointed attorney steps aside, and that's when she was able to retain Matt Rosengart to represent her. And the conservatorship was over 6 months later.
Who was the attorney that the court appointed before?
His name was Sam Ingham.
Okay,
Sam Ingham. Yeah,
wow. So we say, I can't wait to read the book and learn about Judge Penny. Like I said, I met her. I mean, what do I really know? I was in court, regularly, and saw her, and to me, I thought she was honest, wanted to do right.
But she missed this one.
And that problem with all these people is when you're a politician and you make a mistake, you spend the rest of your career, I think, covering the mistake, because that's how you move up, is avoiding errors. And so I mean, it doesn't ring true for me about her, but in general, people in that position of power, the only way you rise up is make sure you don't have any black spots on your record, and this would be a terrible black spot that came out. Wow. Right.
And then she tells the world that this was a voluntary conservatorship.
That's what I had heard. I remember reading that too.
It's not. It was never voluntary, because in order to have something be voluntary, you have to know all the facts. You have to have all of the information ahead of you. So if Britney was being told, which she was, that she wasn't allowed to see the documents that they used to conserve her, that was part of a court order, that she was not allowed to talk to another attorney, she was not allowed to, she never got served with a citation, which is basically like the summons that tells you that you're being conserved. Her due process rights were violated so egregiously, there is no way that anybody involved in these proceedings did not know that, what had been done. And the worst part is when Reva Getz told Adam Streisand on the afternoon of February 4th, 2008, I have a capacity declaration. She most certainly did not.
Wow. I can't say I've never met Reva Getz, so I don't know. Some of these people were kind of before I got involved in probate. So where it stands today is she's now unwound from the.
Yeah, she's been unwound. I'm taking my own social media break right now, so I'm not really following. I've seen that she's in Mexico. I hope she's living her best life. I hope she's having so much fun. The boys are back in her life, even though she was deprived of so much time with them and misconstrued and manipulated, like the whole thing. The whole thing was really just a master class in manipulating a very unsophisticated family from Louisiana. They had no idea what was being done, and as a result, they've all been extraordinarily damaged by the legal system. All of them, mother, father, all of them.
One of the things, my father was an attorney, I would say old school, and I remember as a kid, he practiced in Whittier, California, but occasionally came to Mosque to the county, that was the county courthouse at the time. And it seemed to me that in those days, there was decorum in the court that was different, right? You couldn't come in unless you were dressed properly, unless people all addressed the court with great respect and reverence. And also maybe my spiritual bias came out a little bit, but when people took an oath of office, it was very serious. And one of the changes I've seen is I'm not here to tell people whether they should or should not have a religious or spiritual connection. But what I can say is I can see that the lack of that makes their willingness to lie about things in a courtroom much easier, whether you're religious or not. And I'm not saying, therefore, because I don't ever lie. I hope I don't. I try not to, but we're all human. But I've just noticed that in my lifetime, lying in court went from being extremely rare and people wouldn't do it, and they would almost burst out and admit they were wrong in court in the 70s and 80s, to where today people will say anything if enough money is involved.
I mean, I don't think that this is a religious issue. I think it has more to do with just basically people are not in a community. They're not in a team. In other words, that used to be that if you were in a small town USA, your neighbors, your friends, everybody knew who you are. Everyone knew who you belonged to. Everyone knew, what your grades were and who your friends were. But now we are so far spread out. We don't really even have community anymore. I mean, I have people that live, stone's throw away from me I've never said hello to, just because the nature of a suburban neighborhood anymore. So I think that has a lot to do with it. I don't know that it has so much to do with money, but it's just that we are now raising children in an isolated fashion. And they're even saying that, like, say, parents are exhausted because they no longer have the grandparents to help them raise children. They don't no longer have aunts and uncles and cousins. So I think that is a feature of modern life. And so when there's no one to account to, then your behavior can be much more outrageous.
Well, for the record, my wife's at my grandkids right now, and I'm going there at 5 o'clock. So we're among the few grandkids. Parents are involved. They're the greatest. But I do think you're right. There's an issue of anonymity that you get away with saying things, and then you can walk out of the courtroom and not see anybody. Whereas I think in those days, you were blackballed, or you were shunned, or you were no longer welcome in the community. And I see that. But in court today, I remember the first time that I was in a court matter where I said, "There's no way she's going to lie. There's no way she's going to lie. It's just blatant. And this woman lied." And it was like, and my attorney said, "Are you stupid? Of course she would lie. There's money involved." I mean, people don't have that sense of honor anymore. You're never going to see her again. She can get away with it. And I think that's the issue, if people think they get away with it.
Can you imagine then being Britney Spears and having a judge lie to your lawyer about having a doctor's declaration? I mean, and never, ever being held accountable. Bill, I'm not kidding. I mean, I tracked it out. I even put it in the court file so that if you were to look for a brief by me where I try to point this out. Yes, exactly. And because of the power, who was in power at the time, this was all covered up.
Are you concerned about naming names and retribution and
what are they going to do? I know. It's a fact. If I have facts on my side, I hope they do. I mean, please. And actually, I've gone. If you follow, I was removed from Twitter because different views that I had about violence and the current administration. Anyway, so I'm not on Twitter anymore. I was blackballed from that. But if you ever found me on Twitter, you would see I was very open about it, and I was open about it because I researched it. I had my facts. I know what happened, and I've actually sent letters. I filed memorandum in the court file inviting journalists, Sam Stark, Liz Day, the people in LA Times, New York Times rather, LA Times. I've sent it out 100 times. And why no one took an interest in it, I think, had to do with the fact that this attorney, Matt Rosengart, who, I thought that was the guy. I thought, he was a former prosecutor. I was so excited for Britney and really looking forward to her getting justice. But he became so caught up in celebrity and didn't want to read what I had talked about, didn't want to, I would see him in the hallway, he'd avoid me eventually. And I was the one that was trying to bring Britney justice. And it never mattered to me if she hired me or said, it wasn't about me. It was about fixing the system always, because it's still corrupt.
So, but at the end of the day, she did get unwound, and she does have her freedom back, and is going forward. Which to me, that's a testament to the wrongness of it in the first place, right? Because if she wasn't capable of handling her affairs 15, 20 years ago, how could she possibly do it later? Normally you decline with age. You're less energetic, less mental abilities.
November 1st, you're incompetent. November 13th, competent. I mean, no, it didn't work.
How can that be? That's obviously impossible. She's signing, I don't know her current career, but imagine she's signing multi-million-dollar contracts. She must be ruled competent to manage those as well. I don't know. The whole thing to me, I'm anxious to read the book when it comes out. So let's talk about going forward. You say the system is still corrupt. Obviously, in any legal matter, you get a couple people together, you can have a conspiracy, you can have a bad outcome. But how about the system overall? I know here in California, we did have recently a change in probate law, very minor, not sure how it's going to work out. I think it's one of those things where we solved one problem and created two more. But okay, at least they're working on it. What do you think overall of the process of conservatorship? And is there changes that are positive, or is there changes that you would advocate that should be made?
Yeah. So, obviously this is, I do consulting for Alameda County up north, and this is one of the things we talk about, which is the role of court-appointed counsel. Right now, there seems to be this feeling that court-appointed counsel is like something like a social worker, investigator, person that writes reports. But the worst part is that the court-appointed counsel right now is the person that tells the judge what to do. So if you came to me for conservatorship and said, how does this system work? I would say, yeah, grandma needs a conservator, but if she protests and her court-appointed attorney tells the judge grandma doesn't need a conservator, there will not be a conservatorship. I said, that is simply a process out of my control. So, MacCarley, what would you solve? There is no training, there's no supervision, there's no accountability of court-appointed counsel, and judges need to stay the hell away from attorneys. There should not be a system where judges, court-appointed counsel, pick, assign, review, and engage with lawyers. There should be lawyers for one side, lawyers for the other side, and the judge's job is to call balls and strikes. But that's not what's happening right now. And the other thing, most importantly, is that court-appointed counsel need to be trained. Go up to Sacramento and find out why you need to be an advocate and protect the client's due process rights, but do not make up crap. Last week, I was in a case where an elderly woman was being scammed, one of those phone scams where she gets a phone call from someone saying that he's Mark Harmon, the actor. And so she would go to the bank and withdraw large sums of money from her accounts, thousands of dollars, put thousands of dollars in a box and mail it off to Mark Harmon in Africa or Thailand or Fiji, wherever locations these people are. And when the dutiful daughter brought this to the court's attention, the court-appointed attorney wrote in a report, says, so my client has spoken to Mark Harmon and she wants to send money to him. And the judge said, we're going to let her.
Because the recommendation of the court-appointed counsel. Now, I someone doing painting with a broad brush, but in general, having been in court and seeing scores of court-appointed counsel. I would say there's two groups I've seen. One is they're senior in their practice. They're kind of winding down a little bit. They have a good relation with the judge. The judge kind of trusts them. They're kind of around a little bit, and the judge assigns them some of the cases. That's a percentage. But as a general rule, they're never the attorney that I would recommend if I had a client who asked me for a recommendation.
I know.
Almost always.
I had lunch with a retired judge a couple of years ago, and I gave him a list of all of the court-appointed counsel that I had in my cases. I'm like, legitimately, here's the name of the client, and here's the court-appointed counsel. And the judge looked at the list. He said, I wouldn't have hired any of these people.
Right. Not with your own money. You would never. That's another thing. With your own money, you would never hire. And again, there might be some exceptions, so I don't want to paint too broad a brush.
Right. There are some
well-intentioned. And the other problem is, even the well-intentioned ones, I think, what I've seen is these cases are so complicated. There's so many details. The nature of court-appointed contested cases, they're contested by definition. There's so many details that's the wrong kind of case for that attorney.
Exactly. Well, see, but that's why I'm saying is that there's no training, there's no supervision, there's no accountability. And so what happens is, and this is my theory, is that like I would never be court-appointed counsel because I don't want to be associated with that organization. I don't want anybody to say, oh, Lisa, but aren't you court-appointed counsel? I made this decision years ago, years prior to Britney Spears, because of what I perceived to be this unsavory relationship between the judges and their favorites in the courtroom. I thought that was disgusting. Now I think it's disgusting that there's court-appointed reports where they waive the requirement that the conservatee be brought to court, which is actually a statute says that person facing conservatorship must be brought to court. So they're using court-appointed counsel to violate due process rights.
Well, and also COVID, like the part of the hangover of COVID is there was a time when physically people, for safety.
Everything's on Zoom now. Everything is they actually have this very sophisticated process. I never go to court anymore. I love it. Roll out of bed, keep my jammy bottoms on, put on a jacket. I'm like,
hey, don't admit that. We're supposed to keep that secret. But not only that, even if you want to get them to court, the parking is easier. It's less crowded. Like even if you had to go to court post-COVID, it's easier than ever. There's no reason not to. And yeah, I think you're right. This is a hangover where the judges are just a little too quick to. And there's another thing I've noticed now that you bring this up. I have a friend who has a family law case, divorce case, where there's a court-appointed counsel for a child, and how much the judge was leaning on this it's almost like the judge is no longer judging. The judge has now delegated their job to this court-appointed counsel who nobody would hire, nobody would elect, nobody elected that person. They're just...
And nobody's supervising that person. There's no criteria.
Nobody supervises them.
Kind of like, shooting from the hips. I mean, could you imagine writing a report to a judge saying, yes, Mrs. McIntosh or whatever her name, I mean, this little old dumpy lady from, a little housewife, she's met Mark Harmon and she wants to continue to send money. I mean, we're talking about like taking, buy the guy, this criminals telling this woman to go buy Apple cards and then scratch off the back of the. I mean, she's a victim of crime, and the judge said, "Well, but we're just, I don't want to, take that away from her
because she enjoys it." Yeah, and yet the probate attorneys that you mentioned, these are the attorneys who work for the judges, do the research, review the documents, make recommendations procedurally to the judge, or I should say, highlight the issues that the judge has to adjudicate. I always find that number one, they're all sharp as a tack. Almost all.
That's actually a pretty bright group of people for the most part. Mm-hmm.
And two, they seem modest enough to point to the judge and here's the issue, and you have to decide, judge. Meaning, when they recommend, it's almost always overwhelmingly, it should be approved because we made all the procedures, there's no objections, fine, we're ready to go forward. But when there's any objections, I've never seen them weigh in. They'll say, well, if this, then blah, blah, blah. If not this, then blah, blah, blah. But they're very modest to let the judge make the decision because the judge is supposed to judge and the attorney's not supposed. That is it.
Those attorneys, I mean, again, if it was up to me, if anyone cared about my opinion, what they would be doing is mostly reviewing these petitions. Because remember, there's thousands. Like they have at least in LA County, I believe it would be easy to say there's at least 1,000 new probate, conservatorship, guardianship, trust petitions filed each month. And remember that every month, so there's accumulation because these
Right.
cases don't always
Right.
go away either. Like I have conservatorships that started. I have one that was my old case started in 2008. It was actually another young woman who really did need a conservatorship. So I've had cases that long,
Right.
but so not only is it all of the old cases, but every month another 1,000 cases. And now, of course, some of them drop off. People die, probates get closed, trust matters settle, but the caseload is tremendous. And they're still, to me, it's feeling like these probate attorneys in the office do a pretty good job of making sure that the
Yeah.
constitutional rights, that the notice requirements, that the
Yeah.
prima facie, what we call it,
Yeah.
the baseline of these petitions are accurate, are good.
Yeah. And these, I mean, on one hand, you're frustrated when they're exacting on the procedures. On the other hand, these are designed to protect our rights. And so
Yeah.
if you don't like the law, you can elect an official and remove the law, but don't complain about the law. The law's on the books because somebody made the decision it was for our benefit.
Right.
One of the areas of attorneys, since we kind of covered a broad range and one that we've not got to, that I imagine you work with from time to time are professional fiduciaries, people whose job it is to act on behalf of a client. They might not be, they're appointed, maybe they're approved by the court. They're not necessarily appointed by the court, but maybe somebody will say, I'm supposed to handle this matter, but I don't have the ability. I'm going to hire so-and-so to do it for me. Or there's two people arguing. They agree on an independent as a third party. Now, there's a group of people who there's just not enough of those attorneys. Of all the law, to me, I say that from a career point of view, if you're looking for an opportunity, to me, that seems to be the spot that I would work on.
Right. So what you're talking about are what are now California licensed professional fiduciaries, and
Right.
they actually play a vital role in helping move matters forward for a number of reasons. I mean, I've had cases where the elder simply did not have a relative around. That we just didn't have anybody from the family. It wasn't any lack of love or caring. They just didn't have the capacity to take care of a loved one. Of course, to help resolve disputes between children that don't like each other. That's another reason for professional fiduciary. But in fact, let me just clarify, they are generally appointed. There is an order that appoints a professional fiduciary to look after the affairs, to be conservator, to be successor trustee, to be guardian. And I would agree with you that that is a field that people who are interested in helping seniors, helping others should definitely look into. We definitely need more good professional fiduciaries in LA County, especially Orange County, any of these Southern California wealthy communities, because there's so much at stake, and there's no, like you said, there's no community to bring people together.
And there are these networks of them, and I've reached out at times for referrals, and they're almost all busy. And I've, like you, interviewed some, I've come to know some, and I've actually played the role of fiduciary because you can do one at a time without a license.
That's right.
And if it's a simple case, it's just getting appointed and then selling the property, I feel qualified to handle something like that. So, and I found an administrative company that helps me out. So I've done some of those. I don't. It was very educational. I'm glad I did it.
Yes.
I don't look for that business. I just closed my third one out. So I'm not looking for any more. But if they come across, I have a friend who does that as a business. I actually recruited a friend and I said, you need to do this. You need to get your license.
Yeah.
He was experienced in commercial property management, and we ended up with a huge estate, and he's doing a great job. So that's been a great source of business.
No, I've gotten a few people into the business as well. I think it's a good business. You can be self-employed and really make a big difference in someone else's life.
Really, you're the one who makes the decisions. I think unlike somebody's out, that doesn't mean you get everything the way you want. The court still has to approve it. There's certain rules.
Right.
But you really have a chance to, I think, help somebody who is lost. Like in my case, there are people who inherit a property who, have no business ability. They can't even just sign the papers. They can't even sign the basic documents to get appointed. And probate is very intensive. And we have a professional. We'll say, look, you're gonna inherit $1 million. Let's take $10,000 and have this professional do all the paperwork for you, or not. It's your choice, but I think it'll speed it up. And there are customers who are, I think, very well served to get a professional rather than have to try to do it on their own.
Yeah.
So it just depends.
I absolutely agree. I've represented professional fiduciaries my entire career, and it's always an honor to do so. And I think it makes a big difference in people's lives.
Well, listen, you're obviously very easy to talk to, as well as fascinating experiences in this Britney case. That alone, we could go on for another hour or two. And I look forward to, I know you're working on a book. When you put the book out and you're going to book tour, hopefully I can be one of your podcasts to go back at that time, in between all the major ones. After Joe Rogan.
Here's the tea. Like,
Exactly.
You're going to see this is a crazy lady. And then when I lay it all out with the evidence, in fact, it's one of the things we're working on my website is, if you know anybody that wants to sponsor, it's hard to put it together, only because I'm like you, I'm a baby boomer, so I'm not technical in terms of understanding, but basically you'll read a chapter of the book, and then I will at the end have like a QR code or something on my webpage so that you can see the backup. So for example, the first chapter starts with the end of the conservatorship. I thought that was a very fun day, very exciting, like the energy in downtown LA and all the rallies and hundreds and thousands of people and cameras and everybody from around the world is there. So I thought that would be a kind of a fun way to start. And then what I did is I found footage so that you can go to my website and see the footage of what it actually looked like and what it felt like to be there, so that I'm going to bring people into the Free Britney movement to really understand the travesty of what she was done, but also like what a beautiful expression of love that whole thing was.
It was insane. I have to tell you, I'm just there to sell a house or represent somebody buying a house, and you park your car, you gotta get through the thing, and there's all these people with the signs and the cheering and the energy, and it was like electric. It was like going to, I imagine, a Britney Spears concert. It was that crowd. They were orderly. They didn't go. Interesting. They didn't go inside the building. They were very orderly, very in every regard. But it was really something to see. So I really enjoyed the chance to chat with you about it. And then again, for more information, Lisa, the best way to reach you, I think we have on here on the screen below, your email address, your website, lisamaccarley.com, and your phone number. And then when we have the book, we'll have you back out. Oh, the book is on the website. So is that
the backup for the book, so that you know that I'm for real. So what I'm trying to do is bring sort of this component of not just reading a book, but you'll eventually be able to go to each chapter and see the backup itself.
I just subscribed. I can't wait.
We'll get there.
Okay, very good.
Still working on that.
Well, thanks so much, and congratulations to what you've done so far. Good luck as you continue to go. And again, I think, as a general rule, we're very quick to say so-and-so is wild, crazy, whatever. Take away somebody's rights should be done very, very carefully. And here's a case where you're making a case for somebody who I thought was up and up, might not be. So I can't wait to read the book and get the details and get the tea, so to speak. Lisa, thank you for your time.
Lovely spending time with you.
Thank you. And for the rest of you, this is Probate Weekly. We get together every week and interview usually an attorney or a vendor or a real estate agent, a professional, to help us be more effective in serving our customers across the country. I'm at Bill Gross Probate on social media. If I can help in any way, please reach out at Bill Gross Probate on social media. And if you have any questions on this or comments, put it down below on whatever format you're watching this. And as always, make today your best day ever. Thanks so much.